And you can see the whole of that documentary, Transgender Kids Who Knows Best, tomorrow night on BBC Two at 9 o'clock. But joining us to take this a little bit further, it's a highly sensitive issue, is Sean Fay, a transgender journalist in Bristol. And I guess that goes to the heart of it, Sean. At what point do you think children are able to make up their own mind on something like this?
Well, I think the whole point about this kind of treatment or realisation is actually a lot of it. There's a lot of nonsense in the media at the moment about transgender children and about the kind of treatments that they go through. I mean, something like puberty blockers, for example, which was just discussed there in the clip, are in fact about delaying puberty and allowing children space and time when they've experienced such strong distress in early childhood at their gender role, to actually give them the time before a puberty which they didn't ask for and they're struggling with already takes over and essentially takes a lot of decisions out of their hand that have to be reversed painfully later.
Let me just bring in Ray Blanchard, who's just joining us now from Toronto. Good to have you, Ray. Ray's spent many years researching the factors that determine the development of sexual orientation. And would you go along with that, Ray? Say, actually, if you can take out that messy, awkward, complicated stage of puberty because a small child knows best already, wouldn't you choose to do that?
Well, in the first place, there's a few facts that have to be introduced here for background. Number one, every follow-up study has shown that the majority of children with gender identity issues do not end up transsexual. The majority end up with normal gender identity. Secondly, we have no diagnostic procedure or method that can reliably distinguish which children are going to go in a transsexual trajectory and which ones are going to end up with normal gender identity, even without intervention. And thirdly, I think people who are not enthusiastic about gender transition in very young children take the position that the first line of approach clinically should be helping the child accept his or her sex. If they can't do that, then by puberty, it's reasonable to consider puberty blockers. And so Sean, I'm okay with puberty blockers.
Sean, we heard
only after a screening period.
Let me just bring in Sean again. We heard about a doctor who was fired in Canada for not being gender affirmative enough. In other words, for asking children to pause before making that kind of gender choice. Surely it's right for the medical profession to try and stop that in the first instance because it's irreversible.
Well, one thing I want to say is that actually the doctor in question wasn't fired purely because of his, ideology about children and gender. He was also fired because of a review by his peers, which actually found that his methodology was faulty, but also that his practice as a clinician was abusive. He was photographing children in various states of undress, and his peers couldn't find out any reason why. He was asking them very lurid sexual questions. And, I mean, I have to say
Sean,
that we have to be a little bit wary, Emily, of
categorically untrue.
Okay,
and really, this needs to be stopped.
OK, we've heard from Ray that's categorically untrue. I don't want to go further down these allegations because he's not here to defend himself. But let us look at the wider question, which is essentially that this is something that cannot be reversed for a child. Isn't it eminently sensible in such a young science for clinical practitioners to pause?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, the problem is that when that pause occurs, it sounds very nice and it sounds very reasonable and rational. But these are real people at the heart of it. And unfortunately, one statistic that genuinely is true in this country is that 48% of trans teenagers, before they hit 18, attempt suicide. Let's not think about it, that's attempt.
Gosh.
And what you're condemning to, when you call for this very reasonable pause, is for people who know, and their parents increasingly know, and their teachers increasingly know, and the majority of clinicians know. You're asking them to go through a process that's going to increase their mental distress.
Ray Blanchard, sorry, bring in.
The objective data show that the rates of suicidal ideation and gestures in gender dysphoric children are the same as the rates of those gestures and ideation in other psychiatric populations of children and adolescents. And furthermore, there is no data that the rate of completed suicides is higher in gender dysphoric children and adolescents.
If we just break this down, though, Ray, isn't the question that parents do not want to feel that they are guilty of having failed to listen to their child's concerns when they could have done something meaningful about it?
Yes, I agree. Some parents are being emotionally blackmailed by false information about threats of suicide by gender dysphoria children into thinking that if they make any attempt to help their kid accept their anatomic sex, that they are putting their child at risk of suicide.
Okay.
And it's just pure manipulation
Sean,
by trans activists.
It's manipulation and it's emotionally blackmailing.
I have to ask, who is manipulating? Where is this coming from? I mean, I certainly, I'm transgender myself. I work with a lot of transgender children in the work that I do. No one's parents were looking for this or expected it. It was something new for them too. Most parents of transgender children have had to go through a long process. It's not like your GP pushes it. It's not, it's quite difficult, in fact, to access healthcare in this country. Schools aren't very aware of it. It's this idea that there is some kind of pressure or some trans mob that walks into a home and says, your child's playing with dolls, it's time for surgery. That doesn't happen. It is the child themselves that drives it, and people realise because they want to rescue
We've run out of time. A last word to you, Ray. Do you think it's just
getting the message?
A last word to you, Ray.
Yes?
Do you think it's just because, essentially, this is a very new science, people haven't caught up with where transgender issues are, even those who work within it? Briefly.
I think the problem is that the media coverage, I'm not talking about the BBC here, but media coverage has been so overwhelmingly one-sided in terms of cheerleading for gender transition and has not covered other aspects of the question.
Okay, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. We just lost right at the end there.
I was going to talk about women and power, the lessons of the 20th century, because I think there's a lot of triumphalist talk that masks the real historic situation. And apparently people have decided that because I don't think that post-operative transgender men, i.e. M2F, transgender people are women, I'm not to be allowed to talk.
But surely if a man who feels that he actually would like gender reassignment to make him, her, feel more comfortable in her body, then that's what should be done. They should be allowed to do that.
I'm not saying that people should not be allowed to go through that procedure. What I'm saying is it doesn't make them a woman. It happens to be an opinion. It's not a prohibition. Carry on, if that's what you think it is you want to do. I've been accused of inciting violence against transsexual people. That's absolute nonsense.
But do you feel that the transgender community has too big a voice now? It seems to me you're saying that they're becoming what feminists were often called strident.
Yes, but they very seldom were strident, alas. I think that a great many women don't think that post-operative or even non-post-operative transsexual M2F transsexual people look like, sound like, or behave like women. But they daren't say so.
But just because they daren't say so doesn't mean that that person can't feel like that and feels more comfortable with themselves.
Yeah, but so what? That's not my issue. I don't even talk about it. Not everybody does feel comfortable, by the way, post-operatively. There's been a couple of cases I found very interesting where the actual acceptor of the procedure has felt that it's been a disaster.
But for those who do not feel it's been a disaster and feel more comfortable, then do you understand how they might feel that you have been hurtful towards them?
People are hurtful to me all the time. Try being an old woman. I mean, for goodness sake. People get hurt all the time. I'm not about to walk on eggshells.
So you believe in free speech, really, no matter what?
Well, not quite no matter what. You don't have to say everything that's in your mind. You do use tact in the usual way. I would, for example, with someone who wished to be known as female, use female speech forms as a courtesy.
Now, though, people who are intersex are feeling a little more confident about coming forward and a level of acceptance. But for example, a woman who outwardly has female genitalia but inside has testes and doesn't wish to have them, rather than accepting that she has them, she should be allowed, shouldn't she, and offered the chance to remove these inner testes.
We remove undescended testicles from men because they're dangerous. I'm sure they wouldn't be allowed to just lurk because that would be, I think that would be a problem. I mean, physically a problem. But then it's also a problem if what you have to do after gender reassignment is use steroids every day of your life. That's not a happy outcome either.
But it may be a happy outcome for them, and they may feel that you are in a way denigrating them for taking that road.
Oh, don't even talk about them. They're not my issue. I haven't published anything about transgender for years.
So how do you feel about the idea that Newnham College, your own college, is considering not giving you an honorary doctorate, apparently because of what you've said about the transgender community?
There's been 2 votes at my college on the question of whether or not I should have an honorary degree, and I'm not going to get one. They've been turned down, which is thought by some people to be astonishing, but not by me.
So someone like Caitlyn Jenner, for example, who has been who's been in the front of lots of magazines and apparently is, I think I'm right in saying, getting an award for being a Glamour Woman of the Year. What do you think about that?
I think it's misogynist. I think misogyny plays a really big part in all of this. That a man who goes to these lengths will be a better woman than someone who was just born a woman.
But are people, you would say, necessarily born a woman or born feeling female? And if he feels more female...
It seems to me that that what was going on there is that she wanted the limelight that the other female members of the family were enjoying and has conquered it just like that.
Will Young apparently has a new video out, I don't think you've seen it, in which a transgender person is going down the road and is abused. Reasonable position?
Am I mistaken in thinking that this individual is naked and running down the street with just a hand over her genitals? You try running with your sagging breasts down the middle of the fucking street and see what people will throw a blanket over you and grab you and call the police. For fuck's sake. It is simply not true that intersexual people suffer in a way that other people don't suffer.
Would you ever consider saying something more ameliorating?
No. I'm getting fed up with this, you know. I've had things thrown at me. I've been accused of things I have never done or said. People seem to have no concern about evidence or indeed even about libel.
If a man has his gender reassigned and outwardly and he feels inwardly is a woman, in your view, can he be a woman or not?
No.
Do you understand how people feel that's insulting?
I don't care. People get insulted all the time. Australians get insulted every day of the week.
Finally, if your safety is guaranteed, will you go to Cardiff?
I'm getting a bit old for all this. I'm 76. I don't want to go down there and be screamed at and have things thrown at me. Bugger it. It's not that interesting or rewarding.
Jeremy Greer, thank you very much indeed.